I was lying flat on my back, tubes in my arms, machines beeping around me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even turn my head without pain shooting down my spine. And that's exactly when my sister walked in, not to hold my hand, not to pray for me. She leaned over to my doctor in the hallway, just close enough for me to hear, and said 7 words that changed everything between us forever. She has no family. Whatever happens, happens. She thought I was too broken to fight back. She thought being paralyzed meant being powerless. But what my sister didn't know is that my hand still worked. And one signature, just one, was about to unravel every single thing she thought she had coming to her. They always underestimate the quiet ones. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this story gets so much worse before it gets so much better. My name is Dana, and 18 months ago I was in a car accident that should have killed me. A semi-truck ran a red light doing 50 miles an hour and hit the passenger side of my car. I was alone, thank God, because if anyone had been sitting next to me, they wouldn't have made it. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in a city I barely recognized, hooked to machines, unable to feel my legs, unable to speak above a whisper, with a cervical collar locked around my neck, and 2 cracked vertebrae sitting just millimeters from my spinal cord. The doctors told me later I had a 30% chance of walking again. They told me carefully, gently, like they were handing me something fragile. I remember staring at the ceiling and thinking, okay, I've survived hard things before. What I hadn't survived yet was my sister. Renee is 3 years older than me. Our mother passed when I was 19, our father when I was 24. After that, it was just the 2 of us. Or so I believed. We weren't close in the way people imagine sisters should be. There was always a distance with Renee, a coldness, a way she looked at me sometimes like she was calculating something I couldn't quite see. But she showed up at the hospital. That first day, apparently, she was there. She spoke to the nurses. She filled out the emergency contact forms. She presented herself as my devoted, worried older sister, and everyone believed her. Because why wouldn't they? What I didn't know yet was what she was doing outside those 4 walls. The accident had been the other driver's fault completely. He ran the light, he had no insurance, but the trucking company he worked for did, and it was substantial. My attorney, a woman named Patricia, who I'd hired 2 years earlier for an unrelated property matter, had already been notified by a friend of mine and was building a personal injury case on my behalf. We were talking about a settlement potentially in the mid-6 figures, maybe higher depending on long-term prognosis. Renee knew about the case. I had made the mistake, months before the accident, of mentioning it casually over dinner. A what-if conversation about what I'd do if the lawsuit ever paid out. I'd said something offhand about putting a down payment on a house. Renee had smiled and said, "That would be amazing for you." I didn't think anything of it. I should have, because while I was lying, paralyzed in that hospital bed, Renee was meeting with a different attorney, one she had hired herself. And she was making a very specific argument, that I was mentally incapacitated, that I had no next of kin capable of making decisions for me, and that she, as my closest living relative, should be appointed my emergency legal guardian. If that guardianship went through, she would control every financial decision made on my behalf, including the settlement. I didn't know any of this yet when I heard her in the hallway. I just knew what she said. She has no family. Whatever happens, happens. And I knew, in the way you sometimes just know things in your bones, that she wasn't grieving. She was waiting. But here's what Renee forgot, in all her calculating, in all her quiet scheming. She forgot that Patricia already had my power of attorney. Patricia had been my attorney for 2 years before that accident, and she was not a woman who moved slowly when things mattered. The moment my friend Marcus, who'd been notified by the hospital, called her office and told her what had happened, Patricia was already pulling documents. She had my durable power of attorney on file, signed and notarized, covering financial and legal decisions in exactly this kind of situation. She also had something else: 18 months of detailed notes on my estate, my assets, and my explicit written wishes. Renee's attorney filed for emergency guardianship on a Tuesday. Patricia blocked it by Thursday. But that wasn't the part that ended Renee. That was just defense. What came next was something else entirely. The morning after I heard Renee in that hallway, I asked the nurse for a pen and a notepad. My hand shook. My grip was weak. But it worked. I wrote 3 sentences. I underlined the last one twice. Then I asked the nurse to please call my attorney, the number was in my phone, and tell her to come as soon as possible. Patricia arrived the next morning with a notary. I couldn't speak above a whisper, so I whispered. Patricia leaned in close and listened to every word. Then she straightened up, looked at me with those sharp, calm eyes of hers, and said, "Okay, I know exactly what to do." What I had told her was this: remove Renee from every document that had my name on it, every beneficiary designation, every emergency contact form, every visitation authorization, effective immediately. And then I told her one more thing. Something I hadn't told anyone yet, something I'd been sitting on since the accident, staring at the ceiling, turning over in my mind. 6 weeks before the crash, I had updated my will. Renee didn't know that. The original will, the one drafted after our father died, had left her 40% of my estate. We weren't close, but she was family, and I had been naive enough to believe that counted for something. But 6 weeks before a stranger in a semi-truck blew a red light and changed my life, I had sat in Patricia's office and quietly, methodically, changed every number. Renee's share went to 0. Everything went to a list of people who had actually shown up for me over the years. Friends, a cousin I adored, 2 charities our mother had loved. I had done it for no dramatic reason. Just a feeling, just that quiet instinct that had been whispering to me for years that something about Renee was always slightly off. Turns out instincts know things your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. Patricia filed the updated documents with the court before Renee's guardianship petition even got a hearing date. When Renee's attorney showed up to argue that I was incapacitated and needed her sister's loving oversight, Patricia walked in with a notarized directive signed by my hand 4 days after the accident, a durable POA predating everything, and a will that made Renee legally irrelevant to every financial decision in my life. The guardianship petition was denied in 11 minutes. The settlement from the trucking company came through 4 months later. I was there in person to sign it. I walked into that conference room on a cane, slowly with Patricia beside me, and I signed every page myself, every single one. I never contacted Renee again. She called twice, sent one text that said I was only trying to protect you, and I read it once and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and made myself a cup of coffee. Some people show you exactly who they are when they think you can't fight back. The only thing left to do is believe them. And that's exactly what I did.